Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to people who want to speak more as a way to build their income and grow their business.
Well, welcome everyone. We are so excited to be talking about books today. This is the Wealthy Speaker Teleclass with special guest expert Sam Horn. Our class today is entitled Taking Your Book from Idea to Print, a Process for Getting It Done. And let me just go ahead and give you a little background on one Ms. Sam Horn. Sam is known as America's intrigue expert. She is an award-winning communication creativity consultant with a 20-year track record of results with an international clientele, including Fortune 500 Forum, Young Presidents Organization, Hewlett-Packard, NASA, and a long, long list. She was selected along with Tom Peters and Jim Collins to be a featured speaker at Inc. magazine's annual 500-5,000 convention honoring the top entrepreneurial organizations in the country. Sam is the author of 6 books by major publishers, which we're going to talk to her a little bit about, find out how she did that. And she's worked alongside a long laundry list of some best-selling authors and well-known screenwriters. And we are so honored to have her on the line with us today. Welcome, Sam, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
You're welcome, Jane. I've been looking forward to sharing some ideas about how we can get those ideas out of our head and into print and out into the world.
Fantastic. So many people joining us on the line today have a book inside of them, and our goal is to help them get it out onto the page in a logical, strategic fashion. So what is the very first step someone needs to take when starting a book?
Well, the very first step is I hope everyone has paper in front of them, because of all the best-selling authors that we featured at Maui Writers Conference over 17 years, they didn't agree on much. However, they all agreed on this one thing, and that is to ink it when you think it. So I want people on our call today to make sure and jot these thoughts while they're hot, because if we get an idea and we write it down, we are dramatically increasing the likelihood it will become a reality. So the very first answer to your question, and please write this down, if there's anything I've learned in 20 years of helping people get their books out of their head and into the world, it's that books in our head help no one. In fact, just last week I had the opportunity to be in Key West. Ed Rigsby puts on a nice annual camp for keynoters and authors and entrepreneurs. And so Alan Weiss spent today helping people with their consulting, and Ford Sakes helped them with their internet marketing. And then I helped them talk about how they can turn their intellectual capital into an equity business and brand. So it's not just a book. And Jane, if everyone in the room, exactly half the people had written books, and everyone talked about how it had scaled their success, how they had gotten business they would not have gotten otherwise without that book. And the other half talked about all the reasons they'd been too busy to write the book, and they had plenty of regrets because they realized they were leaving income on the table.
Right. So in terms of actually getting that focus, I talk in my business a lot about picking a lane and being focused and actually developing the products that are going to support your empire. Mm-hmm. And usually that's kind of one idea that we stick with. And I know you come from the author world. That's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. But talk about the focus required moving into a book. How much do you need to really be clear on before you get started?
Well, Jane, I'm in 100% agreement with you about this. In fact, when I work with clients, we talk about the 5 C's, and the first C is exactly what you said, is clarity. We need to be able to state in 60 seconds or less the strategic purpose of this book. So it's not just what is the book about. It is who are your target customers and why is it worth reading and buying this book. And if we can't say it in 60 seconds, then the book is going to be all over the map and it will not achieve our goal. We're all busy people, and the only way that we can justify investing the time and effort in the book is if we know it's going to be a high ROI. So can I tell you a quick story about that?
You bet.
Well, the very first year of the Maui Writers Conference, and for people who aren't familiar with it, we did something that was really unprecedented, is that we gave authors an opportunity to jump the chain of command and meet the top agents and editors in the business across the table. I mean, nowhere were you going to be able to walk up to Robert Loomis, Senior VP of Random House, and pitch your manuscript. And so I'm running around making sure everything's going on time. And I stop into a session with one of the top agents at the time, Michael Larson, and he said, titles sell books. And someone in the audience said, well, what's an example of a good title? And he said, Kung Fu is the best title I've heard in 10 years. And I tell you, Jane, I had responsibilities. I was supposed to be making sure all those sessions were on time. But I went out of his room and I sat down in a chair in the hall, and I had an epiphany. Because, see, I was a speaker. I was jumping on planes, getting paid to speak, and I was also a mom. And I did not have time to read a book or to write a book. And I realized how short-sighted I was being. I was framing this as writing a book was taking away from my speaking career. And as long as my speaking career was busy, that the book would have to wait. Well, that epiphany was writing a book would drive my future better than anything else I did. It would actually be visionary, even if I had to put speaking on the side for 3 months. The 3 months that I would invest in writing the book would then serve me for the rest of my career more than just 3 months of speaking. And now the lovely thing also is that writing was a way for me to be the quality of mom I wanted. Because, see, for many professionals, they feel like their speaking career is almost at the odds of being a quality family person because they are on the road all the time. Well, if you transform yourself into an infopreneur who is rolling out original intellectual capital, not just in books, but in other written products, e-products, blogs, articles, and so forth, it gives you the opportunity to, of course, develop massive passive income. You get to drive your business from home. You get to drive an equity business so that, as Rebecca Morgan would say, you're making money in your jammies, and you get to be the quality of person you want because now you're controlling your calendar because you can be an infopreneur at home without having to jump on planes unless you want to at a higher fee that is now produced because you've proven yourself and positioned yourself as a topic expert through your writing.
Absolutely. So I think we're convinced that we absolutely must write a book. And the people on the line are probably have the idea already in place. Shall we go through the rest of the 5 C's, Sam?
Oh, you bet. The next one, so first C is clear.
Yeah.
The next C is compelling. As you said, Jane, I created the POP process, and the reason is, and the premise of my work, just because something is important doesn't make it interesting. So see, it is our responsibility to make our intellectual capital compelling, and that means it cannot sound or look like everyone else, because by definition, we're one of many. We're one of thousands of people writing, speaking, consulting on leadership, one of thousands of people writing, speaking, consulting on customer service, sales. So see, if we are not popping our material and making it compelling, we're just going to blend in instead of break out. So C for clear, C for compelling, C is for congruent. Isn't it true, Jane, in this business, we get a lot of advice. We get a lot of people telling us, you have to do that and you have to do that. And I am going to suggest for everyone listening today and in the future on the recording that when you get advice, you run it by your gut check because maybe it won't work for you. And I'll give you another classic example of this, is that first book I wrote, Kung Fu, I turned it into my agent, and he took a month to review it, and he came back, he said, Sam, it's brilliant. There's just 2 things wrong with it. I said, what? He said, you wrote in first person. He said, it's amateurish to write in first person, so you need to go back and change that. And he said, and you ask questions. And see, people bought the book, so that's redundant. They already want to know the answers to those questions. So he was the expert, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I abdicated my authority to the expert and did what he said. Well, it took me 3 months to rewrite that book. And I read it and I hated it. It was lifeless, it was passionless, it had no voice. And then I was lucky enough to see a quote by Bruce Springsteen who said, if you write for yourself, you'll always have an audience. So see, I knew I wanted to write in first person because I wanted to be able to say that someone came up to me after a workshop and said, I wanted to reenact those real-life situations. And I really believe in opening chapters with questions or transitioning into chapters with questions. You know, would you like to know what to say when you don't know what to say? I think it helps people turn the page. So I went back and wrote a book for myself, and finally it was Congruent. And of course that book has now been sold around the world in China and Korea and Spain and Singapore.
Wow.
And I think for all of us listening is that if this book passes your gut check, if it is an extension of you, a reflection of you, it is your personality, your convictions, your passionate purpose, your intellectual capital, then that is a congruent and compelling and clear book, and that is going to scale your success.
Great. What's the next C?
The next C is current. And this I found in my work with clients is one of the PODs, points of distinction, is because once again, if we're blogging, if we're writing articles or books, and we are just competing on information, we will look and sound like everyone else. I mean, there's only so many things you can say about communication, only so many things that you can say about teamwork.
Yeah.
So that's why, from now on, follow Annie Lamott's advice. Annie Lamott said, writers get to live life twice. And what that means is that we see the world as material. And when something happens that gets our eyebrows up, it'll get other people's eyebrows up. So if you're watching Glee and something happens that's fantastic, you think, how can I hook and hinge that into my blog? If you're reading Wall Street Journal and there's a fantastic quote from a respected expert in your topic area, well then hook and hinge it into your content in that chapter. Because, Jane, I know that both you and I have had an opportunity to see thousands of speakers in action. We may have been to hundreds of conferences, read hundreds of books, and the person who is current has an immediacy, a relevancy that's coming from today's headlines, that is relevant to today's circumstances, and that person is going to trump the person who is simply competing on content.
Right. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. One more.
Last one is commercially viable. I mean, none of us are doing this as a hobby. When I'm working through with clients, this is always our litmus test, is will people pay for it? You know, will people buy this book? Will companies buy it in volume? Will this book position you at the price of a keynoter that you want to be? Because often people will come to me with head books and hard books. And a head book is a strategic book that will drive business for you. It will position you as a topic expert. It will generate media interest for you. So that's a head book. Often, though, they often have hard books. Maybe they've successfully dealt with breast cancer. Maybe they coach their son's Little League team. Maybe their parents came over from the old country and they want to write their memoir. And so commercially viable is if we're at a stage in our life where we don't need to drive business, or we're toward the end of our life and we're thinking more about a legacy book, and we really don't, it doesn't matter to us if it makes money. It's more about getting a message out. Well, then maybe we can indulge and write a heart book. However, if this book in any way, shape, or form is meant to be part of our umbrella brand and business and be purposeful and be a payoff, then it's got to make money.
Okay, and I'm going to guess that most of the people on our line are very much interested in making money with their books, and that they are using the book to position them as an expert. Some people may delve into heart, but I think probably the majority of people are coming at it from a head book. So I think that's a safe bet for the group on the line with us. Before we move forward, you mentioned Annie Lamott. Bird by Bird, is that her book?
It sure is.
Okay, so Bird by Bird is one of the lists of reading materials for people who are really interested in getting inspired to write. I found that Bird by Bird was hugely inspiring, and I think you introduced that to us when we were in Cancun, or in Mexico, for a conference. Give us maybe one or two other books that are inspirational like that, that would either give people some structure or help them move forward.
What a great suggestion, Jane. Another one is Stephen King is really recognized as a master writer. And even if you don't like horror books, it doesn't matter, because this man can write. And his book on writing, many people feel, is one of the best books out there. He really talks about how we can turn our life experience into a page-turning book, the craft of writing, how we can keep people glued to the page, how we can develop a book that is timeless and that's going to be enduring. So Stephen King's book is another excellent one.
Great. Okay, that's a couple for us. That's terrific. Okay, so let's move into title, and then I really want to get into how we actually pull the information from our brain out onto the paper. So first, let's talk title, though. What are some of the criteria for a strong title?
Well, in POP we talk about 25 different ways to come up with great titles. So in our time today, I'm just going to cover 3 of them.
Oh, perfect.
And one of them is to make sure that we select a title that is purposeful and strategic. Bill Bernbach, the ad genius, said, "Dullness will not sell your product. Neither will irrelevant brilliance." Isn't that a great phrase?
It is a great phrase.
See, we're not trying to come up with just a cutesy title, and we're even not trying to just come up with a title that will stop people in their tracks. We go back to the W-9 form in my book, Pop, that asks people about what problems are you solving, and who's your target audience, and who are your competitors, and how are you different from them, and what resistance or objections will people have to this. And so we throw all that into the mix, and I'll give you an example. Is that one of my clients is Charlie Pellerin. Charlie was NASA's top astrophysicist, and he was in charge of the $1.8 billion Hubble. Well, now, Charlie wanted to write a book, but see, it would not have been strategic just to position him as the project manager of the Hubble, because these days, the attention isn't on the Hubble, and furthermore, he was the project manager years ago. So we purposely positioned his book to make sure that it was getting across the message about his business now, which is working with organizations to build teams. Because how Charlie started off his book, which was guaranteed to get your attention, is that he was the individual responsible for sending the $1.8 billion Hubble into space with a flawed mirror. Also, though, that then his project team was the one that was able to mount a mission to repair that mirror in space, and now it has become what is generally agreed to be man's greatest scientific instrument. So we wanted to position Charlie and have a short title that would trade off the alliance with NASA, because NASA is universally known and respected, and that would position him as a topic expert on the work he does now, which is to help organizations build teams. So the title of his book is How NASA Builds Teams. Now, that's not what you would call a sexy title, but boy, is it driving a lot of business for Charlie Pellerin.
Good.
Which is, if you're going to write a book, you ask yourself again, what do I want this book to drive for me, and is this title going to make that happen? Is it a cute title? No. Does it get people who are interested in that particular subject? Does it motivate them to pick up the book and read it? You bet it does.
Yeah, I'm all for saying what it is you need to say. Sometimes we can do it in a clever, cutesy, sexy way, whatever it might be, and sometimes we just have to say it, don't we?
That's exactly right. So you want another example of that?
Yes.
Another of my clients is Adrienne Ott. Adrienne Ott has been called the best consultant in Silicon Valley, which is quite an accolade. She was the winner of a Garage Award for Hewlett-Packard, and she's got lots of media attention. And so, once again, for everyone on the call, if you want to scale your career, see, she was very well known in the Silicon Valley, but Adrienne wants to go national and international. She doesn't want to just limit herself to Northern California. The best way to do that? Well, speaking is nice. Still, it is not as nice as a book that breaks out, gets national and international media, drives international speaking engagements, etc. So, Adrienne's area of expertise is not just customer service, because customer service many people think is front line. And front line, that's more training. That's not bringing in someone on a keynote level. She wanted to make sure she was positioning herself, and so much of my work, Jane, is not just coming up with title. It really is messaging and positioning. What can we come up with so that it tells a story about you and brings you in at the level of respect so that your target audience gets who you are, what you do, and wants to work with you? So we knew we wanted the word customer in the title, but we did not want service in the title because that would belittle or diminish the level at which she works, the large conceptual consultant level. We also wanted her to be current for all the reasons we just said, is that if she's just talking about customer, that's blah, 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 blah. That's a one of many books. So how could we give a sense of urgency that tied into what's going on in that industry, that gives free information in just a few words about the trends in that industry, about through social media, through blogging, through the internet, and so forth, that the whole customer service game has changed. Well, after some strategic brainstorming and writing down all of her keywords and playing with them and so forth, we came up with a title that's helped her book from HarperCollins, Go Global. You know what the title is?
What?
The 24-Hour Customer.
Oh, very good.
Boom. And see, now, once again, it's not cutesy, folks. What it does, though, is it's strategic. See, 24-hour, without saying social media or without saying blogging or websites, or that gets across. And it's got the word customer in there, and every single organization is concerned about a customer. And essentially, it's a stake in the ground title because she's introducing a movement, really.
Yes.
She's framing a whole topic, and now she just created a phrase that she owns. She goes to the head of the class because she came up with it. So does this position Adrienne to come in and speak at high-level international conferences, position her as a topic expert where she created a one-of-a-kind name? You bet it does.
Right. And the 24-hour customer is a brand. Like you said, it could be the beginning of a movement. And I love the idea of creating something that is uniquely yours, that people are referring to the 24-hour customer much later on in their workplace. And that's what we really want with our titles. Okay, terrific. So
let's for one more example, by the way?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, one more example is because some people know me as the title lady or the book lady, and certainly there are times when a, quote, cutesy title or a clever title, or a coin title absolutely is purposeful. And, of course, Kung Fu is certainly an example of that. See, the best way to corner a niche is to create a niche. And the best way to create a niche is to coin your own word. Because then, of course, you radically increase the likelihood you're going to get a .com. And when you can get a .com in today's world, now you have the domain name, which is almost non-negotiable. You need the domain name of your book. Now, furthermore, though, you coin a word, like I did with Tung Fu. You can trademark that word. Now, you have an equity business in perpetuity, because I've certified people in Tung Fu around the world. You know, I have merchandised Tung Fu. I've niched Tung Fu. There's Tung Fu for school. There's Tung Fu for attorneys. So, see, you have revenue change in perpetuity. So there are certainly times, Freakonomics, of course, is another example of a coined word that is clever and strategic that has catapulted those authors into the income stratosphere. There's even a Freakonomics movie. There's Freakonomic blogs. There are many people under that umbrella. So that is yet another way you can come up with a strategic title that will scale your success in ways that are better than you can imagine.
Great, great. So let's just do a quick little plug here. If people want to get the W-9 form from POP, should they go to, they want to see your book called POP. What's the full title of that?
It is POP, Create the Perfect Pitch, Title, and Tagline for Anything. It's from Perigee Penguin, and Seth Godin, who many of us think is just an absolute genius, said that a third of the way through POP, you'll be begging to hire me as your consultant, which would be just fine with me.
Great. And where can they get that? Should they go to samhorn.com?
You know what? They sure can, and I'll even make people a deal. Of course, it's on Amazon. It's in bookstores, Sam Horn, or we'll make it easy for you. If you want to email us at info@samhorn.com, put W-9 form in it, we'll go ahead and send you a condensed version of the W-9 form. So you're welcome to get it in the book or at our website or at that email address.
Great. We appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so we've talked about it being purposeful and strategic. You are going to give us, did we get to the second two, the other two?
You know,
or titles?
Well, I can, and believe me, we've got 25, so shall we go to another one real quick?
Well, I just wasn't sure. I think you really nailed it on the title thing, so I think we're okay.
Good.
So let's move forward then, and once we have our title in place, how do we start to actually dig into our own brains and take our ideas onto the page? What's the structure?
Excellent. So, Jane, since we're talking about the page, why don't we have a page in front of us?
Okay.
Okay, so everyone, please get a fresh piece of paper in front of you. And now, we don't have time to go into my whole process, so I won't be able to talk you through the specific steps I take clients. However, we can do a couple of those steps, okay?
Okay.
Just for now, please just put 2 vertical columns on that piece of paper.
Okay.
Now, in the second column, in the one on the right, not the one on the left, put the word points.
Okay.
And you can also put suggestions. And you can also put steps. So it's points, suggestions, and steps.
Okay.
Now, from the quick intros at the beginning of our call, Jane, I know a number of the people on the call, and I know that they've been in this business for years. So chances are they are very familiar, very conversant with their topic. They've already been speaking and writing on it for years. So what I'm going to suggest is in the second column, you just presuppose that you would like to make 10 to 20 points about this topic. So right now, just right off the top of your head, just say, well, if I'm going to write a book about this, this is one of the points I'd like to make. If I'm going to write a book about this, well, this is a suggestion I would want to be sure to include. Well, if I was going to write a book about this, here's a step that readers would need to take in order to make this happen, to make this right, to follow up on this. So if you numbered 10 to 20 points, then you're already drafting out some of the content on the book. However, one of the most important things I can say on our call today, and I'm pleading with everyone on the call, do not use that as your working outline.
Okay.
Because we would be competing on content. And chances are other hundreds of experts on your topic would be making much the same points. So if that's your lead domino, if you're just competing on the points you want to make, the steps people take, then we are going to look and sound like everybody else. This book is going to blend in instead of break out. It is not going to position us as the preferred go-to expert because we're not saying anything new. Now, if we have time later on, I'm going to talk about this premise because people say, Sam, there's nothing new under the sun. Of course there are new things under the sun. In fact, the degree to which you break out, the degree to which you're one of a kind instead of one of many, depends on the degree to which you introduce new information. So, of course, all my clients in audiences say, how, Sam? Well, here's just one of the ways. Now in the left-hand column, for every point you want to make, you are going to come up with a real-life example. Now, I am not talking about an apocryphal story. I'm not talking about a made-up story. I'm not talking about a story you get from reading someone else's book. Never, ever quote a peer. If we want to know what Stephen Covey has to say about this, we'll read his book. Never, ever quote John Maxwell or Tony Robbins. If we want to know what they say, we'll read their books. We want to know what you have to say on this topic. So what is a real-life experience of a consulting client who had a problem and came to you, and because of your insights or because of your work together, the lights went on and the band played, and it perfectly illustrates that point you want to make. What is a client who had a challenge and you made a suggestion or they took this particular step and as a result they were able to turn around the situation? So with every chapter, we start with the example first. We recreate that story. We make it come alive. We put people in the scene by using back and forth dialogue, by using vivid imagery so they can see what we're saying. And now several things are happening. Number one, if you start every chapter, if you start every blog, if you start every point in your presentation with a real-life example, it turns your books into page turners and it keeps your audience on the edge of their seats. Because see, they haven't heard this before, so the eyebrows are up. Furthermore, they're right brain engaged. Instead of a book just being neck-up rhetoric and a data dump and an intellectual exercise, now we are wholly involved because we're reading about real-life people just like us who have the same challenges, who have similar problems, who are going through relevant circumstances, and we are getting social proof of how your ideas or suggestions or points have already been enacted by other people and gotten them the same results that we want. So we're having a when Harry meets Sally all have what they're having. And furthermore, at the end of each original real-life example that shows rather than tells, we then hook and hinge over into our point. And now better yet, that is no longer going to be a cliche or a platitude because we are going to couch the point or the suggestion using the language of the example, which will help make it pop because now it's going to be one of a kind instead of one of many. Now, I've been talking. It's all been neck-up rhetoric, blah, 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 blah. So shall I demonstrate what we've been talking about by using an example that makes it come alive?
Sure.
Good, okay. Last year, I swam the rough water swim, the Waikiki rough water swim. It's a 2.4-mile swim that runs parallel to Waikiki in Honolulu, Hawaii. Well, this year, I promised myself I wasn't going to be going back to Maui, so I promised myself I would sample every one of the 22 public pools in this community of Reston. I live right outside of Washington, D.C. Well, I wrap up a day of consulting. I'm going to swim some laps, And here's this pool that I hadn't noticed before. It's tucked under some shade trees. So I impulsively park and go in. I walk in. No sooner do I walk in than I realize I have found the family pool. There is a fountain in the shallow end. The place is packed with kids, all playing Marco Polo. And I was so glad to know that kids still play Marco Polo. Well, I make myself comfortable on the only chaise lounge available. And the woman next to me has 3 kids, probably all under the age of 10, who are playing in front of her. I mean, it's just like a scene out of Norman Rockwell. A man in a business suit walks in, and the 3 kids run out of the pool, run over to him, "Daddy, Daddy." He comes over, he gives the woman next to me a peck on the cheek, and then he goes into the locker room to change. A couple minutes later, he walks out in his swim trunks and he gets into the pool with his kids, and they are diving off his shoulders. The kids are showing him the strokes that they've learned in their swim lessons, and it's like the Waltons coming alive right in front of me. The man stops for a moment, and he looks up at his wife, and he said, "Hon, why don't we change our default? Why don't we just meet at the pool every night after work?" And Jane, I held my breath. I looked at her and I'm thinking, please say yes. And she looked at him and she said, "Why don't we?" And in 5 seconds, they changed a default that could favorably impact the rest of their life. They changed the default that could turn this summer into the summer they met Dad at the pool afterward. And now if you're wondering, what does this have to do with writing a book, or what does this have to do with giving a presentation? When I work with clients, the first thing we do is to change our defaults, is to disrupt the defaults that are holding us back from writing this book, getting it out of our head and out into the world. For example, one people's default is, "I don't have time." And see, many people feel that to write a book, you have to have blocks of free time. And since they don't ever have blocks of free time available, they don't ever write the book. Well, we change that default by saying you are going to write everywhere. You're going to write on the plane. You're going to write at lunch. You're going to write 15 minutes in the morning. You are going to reframe what it means to write. Because if you realize that if you jot the thought when it's hot, your personality will be on the page. You will be writing the book when you are in that exquisite state of flow. And now writing is no longer hard work that you have to force yourself to sit down and force yourself to do it in these big blocks of time. It's something you do here, there, and everywhere. It becomes an organic part of how you are in the world. Then those thoughts that are in your head will flow out so fast, your fingers will hardly be able to keep up.
Oh, you're so inspirational. Let's talk about, you inspired me when we were in Mexico to pick do you call it a third spot?
I'm so glad you said that. Thank you, Jane. It's called a third place. And see, I'm a part of when I work with clients, I give them a CD that says, "I can't believe I wrote the whole thing." And see, the study of ergonomics and of feng shui says that our home is our first place and our office is our second place. And for many of us, we work out of our home office. Well, our environment influences our effectiveness. And if we are trying to write a book in the very same place that we are handling speaker invoices and checking email and doing Facebook, our surroundings are sabotaging our efforts. Because, see, writing in that space is alien to what we normally do in that space. Our environment's going to continue to call us to check our email or to send a tweet or something like that. So, Jane, you're exactly right. I suggest that people who are serious about getting a book done this year, that they identify their third place. And the third place is a public place nearby where they can work in private. For example, a Starbucks or a Panera Bread. In Canada, it's at Chapters. Some people work in the Barnes & Noble. Because if you set up a ritual where even if it's just once a week, every Saturday morning at 8, you go and you write. Every Saturday morning at 8, you go and write. Every Saturday morning at 8, you go and you write. Does the name Pavlov ring a bell? Go ahead.
You really inspired me to do exactly that, and The Wealthy Speaker was written at the Starbucks inside the Chapter store. So I was surrounded by books in my favorite coffee shop with my headphones in with my own kind of calm music playing. And you've got me so inspired that come Wednesday, actually Thursday, I'll be beginning a technology sabbatical. No cell phones, no laptop except to write for the entire Christmas season or holiday season until January 3rd. So I'm really committed to doing another project, and thanks for being on the line with us because you're really inspiring me as well. But I know that there are people on the line here who probably have some questions for you, Sam. Is there anything we need to say before we open it up for some Q&A?
Well, just kudos to you, Jane, because you're modeling for everyone the value of carving out time, carving out a space, and going somewhere where you can create a cocoon of concentration. Because, see, now writing isn't an isolated project. If you're social, the thought of writing alone may strike fear in your heart because it seems so, quote-unquote, lonely. So see, that's the beauty of going to a public place is you're surrounded by people. However, they're not interrupting you. They don't want your attention. So it's the best of both worlds. You get to feed off the energy of the people in the room. However, you have a cocoon of concentration, a ritualistic place to write where you are getting more things done. And as you're role modeling for us, Jane, if we want to produce intellectual capital that's going to continue to drive our career, it's the single best investment of our time and resources.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. If anyone on the line would like to ask a question, you are going to need to hit on your phone keypad *6 and introduce yourself first. Just start with, this is David, this is Cindy, this is Sonia, and we will try to take one question at a time here for Sam.
Hello.
This is Sandra.
Go ahead. Go ahead. We had a gentleman speaking up first there, and then we'll come to the woman.
If there was more than one gentleman, then I don't know. This is John Barsati.
John, go ahead, please.
No one. Sam, when you jot these thoughts down and your moments of inspiration, wherever you might be, and they're on this piece of paper, that piece of paper, on the back of this envelope, on the back of that envelope, where does it go? Where do you put it, and how do you remember?
Well, good for you for asking that question. Winnie the Pooh said, organization is what you do before you do something, so that when you do it, it doesn't get messed up. So you are right. I suggest an organizational structure for these jot the thoughts while they're hot. Now, it doesn't have to be a formulaic organizational structure. It's just what works for you. So I'll give you several of the organizational structures that have worked for clients. If you are working on a book and you do have your table of contents, then when you do jot a thought that it's hot, maybe you just saw something in the paper, you think, okay, what chapter does this go into? And you either throw it in the file folder for that chapter, or you carry with you your table of contents. And you actually, this is chapter 4, you would actually write that quote next to chapter 4. Or if you have a digital recorder, there are, folders where you can put that thought, that story, that link in that chapter, or in this upcoming blog post. So you are right. Don't be content just to jot the thought while it's hot. You immediately think, where would this go? What is the theme of this? Or where would this go into my presentation? So you are anticipating where it would be relevant, and then you're storing it in a place where you're going to find it when you get to that blog post, get to that chapter, or start preparing that presentation.
Good stuff. Good
Sounds
question, John. Now, I think you can be as high-tech or as low-tech as you want with this. You can pop it into your iPad in a note or whatever, or I did an outline for a book on the back of a boogie board using Post-it notes. So I feel like it can be low-tech as well, and as long as you don't forget the idea, that's the main thing. Right, Sam?
And forgetting the idea is not an option, because a very quick story about this. Frank McCourts, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author of Angela's Ashes, came to speak for us, and I'm out making sure my intros are right, and there's Frank. He's got 2 high school composition notebooks, and he was writing away in one, and then he'd startle, and then he'd write something down in the other one, and then he'd go back to writing in the first one. Now, I normally would never interrupt someone in flow, but I said, Frank, 1 question, 1 minute, I'm out of your hair. What are you doing? And he said his granddaughter had visited him one time. She woke up early, so he was up with her, and she was still in this dream state, and he said she was so incredibly imaginative, he promised himself he would write first thing he got up every morning, because when you're writing a book, you kind of eat, breathe, live, and sleep it. So he knew he would be capturing fanciful language. But what would happen 5 minutes into writing in this composition notebook, because, see, that was his ritual. He was a former high school English teacher. Some little to-do would pop into his head, like, it's Malachi's birthday, got to get a birthday card. Have to call my agent. And what would happen, he would quickly lose his train of thought, and that great flow would go away. So he promised himself, as soon as he thought of a to-do, he would write it down in his other book, and then here are Frank McCourt's magical words. He said, and then I am free to forget it.
Wow, that's great. Good
now,
tip.
One other thought he had is that he also learned, because then he would write it down, he's free to forget it, but then he would come back and he was mentally dead in the water. Where was I going with this? What point was I going to make? What was the next scene? So before he pulled away from his novel, he would think, what is this character going to say next? Or what's the next scene? He would just write down 1 or 2 words to trigger that train of thought, so that when he came back, he could pick up that mental momentum again and hit the ground running.
Wow, good one.
One follow-up question, please.
Go ahead.
How about eBooks? Is that covered anywhere on your website, Sam, or is that perhaps another teleclass, Jane, that might come up later?
Let's talk eBooks.
Well, and thank you for bringing that up. Actually, in my mentoring program, we have a 12-month program where we take people through the whole process. And I mean, not just, from hard books to eBooks. Then the last 6 months of this are actually, okay, now let's talk about social media. Now let's talk about turning it into presentations. Now let's talk about turning it also into consulting. So one of those months, and yes, I do work with clients about how can we multi-purpose our intellectual capital. So when we are writing a book, we are already thinking of chunking it into smaller niche ebooks, so we don't just have everything we know in one book, which is really being short-sighted. We're constantly thinking about how we can roll it out in special reports, ebooks, white papers, so forth.
If you had to choose between an ebook and a soft or hardcover book, what would you do at this stage, knowing what we know about the sale of ebooks last year?
Well, thank you, Jane. And maybe what Jane is referring to is that Amazon is now selling more Kindle books, ebooks, than hard copy books. And boy, is our publishing industry turning upside down these days. So the answer to the question, though, is yes. Because the books are strategic. E-books are strategic for some people because, of course, the turnaround time is immediate. There's no barrier to entry. I mean, once you get a classy, professional, quality PDF ready, you can have an eBook. So you may not want to wait for the time of producing a trade paperback or a hardback. However, there is going to be at some point in your career where you want to produce a hardback book. So if you are $10,000-$15,000 keynote, trying to position yourself around an ebook is not going to carry the same clout as having a hardback book. So at different stages of your career and for different purposes, each of those is going to be worth your while depending on what you're trying to achieve with it.
Great. Okay, let's go on and take the next question. There was a woman who had been on the line early there.
Yeah, my name is Frances, and I have kind of a double-barreled question. I have found that I am better at speaking, like using Dragon Naturally Speaking to get my thoughts out than actually writing it down, probably because I edit too much. However, I have heard that it's a better idea to write than to speak it, that something happens in the brain, and I wanted your thoughts on that. And two, I'm having difficulty finding that third place because I prefer to do it with the speaking. I mean, I can be mobile, but where can I do that and not disturb others? So I just wondered if you'd run into that kind of situation.
Well, and is it Frances or Francis?
It is.
Frances? Wonderful. And Frances, I'm so glad you brought that up, and I really am reaching out to everyone listening to this. The most important thing is to come up with what works for you. Terry Brooks would get up and say, you have to work with an outline, and Elizabeth George would get up and say, I never work with an outline. So see, if Dragon Naturally Speaking works for you, then by all means do that. And I'll give you a quick example, is that I had an opportunity to work with Terry Jones, who's the founder of Travelocity and of Kayak. Well, he is brilliant. And the thought of writing, though, he would take on almost a different persona. And all of a sudden, the juice and the jazz would go out. But when he was telling stories, he was quintessentially himself. So my question to you is, if you don't love to write, if your wheelhouse is speaking, if you rock and roll when you're telling these stories and you're at your best because it's what you're good at, well then by all means either talk out your book to a writing partner, use Dragon Naturally Speaking, because if your personality is best when you're speaking, then get that recorded and then you're cleaning up the transcript instead of trying to write it from scratch. And as far as that third place, by the way, if once again, speaking for you is the best likelihood of getting out a book that's an extension of you and that's going to scale your intellectual capital, then ask a friend if they have a room in their house where there would be some privacy, and maybe you could talk out your book to them. You have your working outline in front of you. Maybe they're interviewing you so they can hear where a story just isn't complete yet, and they can come back and say, give me some more visual details there. Or that person could hold you accountable and say, that's a fantastic example. Now, how does it tie into this point? Or, you know what, we need a transition into the next chapter, so I can't wait to turn the page. How would you bridge into that? So perhaps you could swap services with a colleague where you go to their house and you have a room that's kind of a studio, so it has good sound quality, and you are speaking to them and you're talking out your book, and they're holding you accountable for making sure that each chapter is fully fleshed out so that you have a high-quality recording and transcript that's going to expedite a finished product.
Thank you. Thanks, Frances. Great. Who else would like to ask? I think we have time for one, maybe two more questions.
Hello, this is Blake.
Go ahead, Blake.
Hello. I just wanted to say a big thank you to you, Sam, for what you pointed out about the title, because the book that I have out and in circulation now is a book that's titled in a way that it's a bit of a love-hate relationship depending on who's holding the book. And then I liked what you pointed out about things like Kung Fu and Freakonomics. And what I was wondering was, at what point do you decide this is something that is catchy and it will lead to its own brand versus, all right, let's pull back and just rework this thing and go back to the drawing board so it's retitled in 6 months to a year?
Well, Blake, what a great question. And once again, I go back to what's strategic. For example, the title, He's Just Not That Into You, that title not only got a 7-figure book deal, it not only became, multi-million-dollar movie, it took someone who was a writer on a sitcom, Sex and the City, who was completely behind the scenes, and it catapulted him into having his own talk show and so forth. So see, clearly, that clever title, which almost became iconic, was purposeful because it was scaling his career. So I guess I would look at your title, and once again, it's not enough just to get people's interest. Is it driving media that's paying off for you in terms of business? Is it getting buy-in from consulting clients who now want that service from you that you outline in the book? So what is the bottom line deliverables of that title? Because if people say, oh, that's a cute title, but then they're not booking you to speak on it, or they're not buying volume copies of it, or they're not wanting to coach with you, well, just getting attention isn't enough. It really has to serve that greater goal that shows up in your bank account.
Good. I think we might have time for one more question, and there was a gentleman who was right before Blake there. Come back to us again if you can.
Hey, Jane, this is Jerry Miner. How are you?
Go ahead, Jerry. How are you doing? Go ahead and ask your question.
Doing great. Sam, I have a head-up question. I missed what I believe was the 4th C. I got clear, compelling, current, and commercially viable. Did I miss number 4?
Clear, compelling, current.
Congruent.
Yep, congruent.
Congruent.
Yeah, congruent is, and by the way, and that's so important because I'm going to try and come up with a quick other example. Is that I had a client who was being told that she had a nice big contract with a major publisher, and they were saying that in order for her to be taken serious, because she was a female in a male-dominated industry, that this book needed to be a door-stopper, that it needed to be like a big 300-page book, so she would be taken seriously. Well, in my personal opinion, today people look at 350-page books, and they're thinking, I don't have the time or energy of that. And a lot of times it's a barrier to entry. People won't even pick the book up off the shelf, even if it's got great information. So, see, that advice was not congruent with what she wanted. She wanted an airport bookstore book because her audience were road warriors, executives who would buy something, and they'd buy a 180-page book. But, so we kind of went to the mat over that issue. And that's an example of how if you're getting advice and it's not congruent with your voice or your vision or your values, go to the mat and stick with what works for your gut.
Or your gut, yeah. Good one. All right. Well, listen, everybody, we're at the end of our time today. I thought our recording failed, Sam, but it looks like we're okay on the recording front, so we'll be getting you a copy of that. And anyone who is a member of the club or a private coaching client with me will also get a copy of the recording. Sam, let's make sure people know how to be in touch with you. info@samhorn.com. Is that correct?
That's right. SAMHORN. We'll be glad to send you that W-9 form that we talked about that can make sure that you're really thinking your book through, so that it's going to pay off for you over the long haul in terms of an equity brand in business that positions you as a topic expert and that gets your message out in a way that makes a positive difference for others and a prosperous living for you.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule here in December to be with us, Sam. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speaker Show. Please visit speakerlauncher.com for your free Wealthy Speaker audit and visit speakerlauncher.com/podcast for show notes and many more resources to help you catapult your speaking business. See you soon, wealthy speakers.